So we're still in 2kings. I haven't been reading it. I don't know, because I've been doing stuff. So 2kings 5. That's where I'm at.
Chapter 5. The Healing of Naaman. The king of Aram had great admiration for Naaman, the commander of his army, because through him the Lord had given Aram great victories. But though Naaman was a mighty warrior, he suffered from leprosy. At this time, Aramean raiders had invaded the land of Israel, and among their captives was a young girl who had been given to Naaman's wife as a maid. One day the girl said to her mistress, "I wish my master would go to see the prophet in Samaria. He would heal him of his leprosy." So Naaman told the king what the young girl from Israel had said. "Go and visit the prophet," the king of Aram told him. "I will send a letter of introduction for you to take to the king of Israel." So Naaman started out, carrying as gifts 750 pounds of silver, 150 pounds of gold, and 10 sets of clothing. The letter to the king of Israel said, "With this letter I present my servant Naaman. I want you to heal him of his leprosy." When the king of Israel read the letter, he tore his clothes in dismay and said, "This man sends me a leper to heal? Am I God that I can give life and take it away? I can see that he's just trying to pick a fight with me." But when Elisha, the man of God, heard that the king of Israel had torn his clothes in dismay, he sent this message to him: "Why are you so upset? Send Naaman to me, and he will learn that there is a true prophet here in Israel." So Naaman went with his horses and chariots and waited at the door of Elisha's house. But Elisha sent a messenger out to him with this message: "Go and wash yourself 7 times in the Jordan River. Then your skin will be restored, and you will be healed of your leprosy." But Naaman became angry and stalked away. "I thought he would certainly come out to meet me," he said. "I expected him to wave his hand over the leprosy and call on the name of the Lord his God and heal me. Aren't the rivers of Damascus, the Abana and the Pharpar, better than any of the rivers of Israel? Why shouldn't I wash in them and be healed?" So Naaman turned and went away in a rage. But his officers tried to reason with him and said, "Sir, if the prophet had told you to do something very difficult, wouldn't you have done it? So you should certainly obey him when he says simply, 'Go and wash and be cured.'" So Naaman went down to the Jordan River and dipped himself 7 times as the man of God had instructed him. And his skin became as healthy as the skin of a young child's, and he was healed. Then Naaman and his entire party went back to find the man of God. They stood before him, and Naaman said, "Now I know that there is no God in all the world except in Israel. So please accept a gift from your servant." But Elisha replied, "As surely as the Lord lives, whom I serve, I will not accept any gifts." And though Naaman urged him to take the gift, Elisha refused. Then Naaman said, "All right, but please allow me to load 2 of my mules with earth from this place, and I will take it back home with me. From now on, I will never again offer burnt offerings or sacrifices to any other god except the Lord. However, may the Lord pardon me in this one thing. When my master, the king, goes into the temple of the god Rimmon to worship there and leans on my arm, may the Lord pardon me when I bow too." "Go in peace," Elisha said. So Naaman started home again. The greed of Gehazi. But Gehazi, the servant of Elisha, the man of God, said to himself, "My master should not have let this Aramean get away without accepting any of his gifts. As surely as the Lord lives, I will chase after him and get something from him." So Gehazi set off after Naaman. When Naaman saw Gehazi running after him, he climbed down from his chariot and went to meet him. "Is everything all right?" Naaman asked. "Yes," Gehazi said, "but my master has sent me to tell you that 2 young prophets from the hill country of Ephraim have just arrived. He would like 75 pounds of silver and 2 sets of clothing to give to them." "By all means, take twice as much silver," Naaman insisted. He gave him 2 sets of clothing, tied up the money in 2 bags, and sent 2 of his servants to carry the gifts for Gehazi. But when they arrived at the citadel, Gehazi took the gifts from the servants and sent the men back. Then he went and hid the gifts inside the house. When he went into his master, Elisha asked him, "Where have you been, Gehazi?" "I haven't been anywhere," he replied. But Elisha asked him, "Don't you realize that I was there in spirit when Naaman stepped down from his chariot to meet you? Is this the time to receive money and clothing, olive groves and vineyards, sheep and cattle, and male and female servants? Because you have done this, you and your descendants will suffer from Naaman's leprosy forever." When Gehazi left the room, he was covered with leprosy. His skin was white as snow. Chapter
So that was 2 Kings chapter 5. Wait, come on. So it says 2 Kings chapter 5, verse 1. Now Nabal was commander of the army of the king of Aram, and he was a great man in the sight of his master and highly regarded, because through him the Lord had given victory to Aram, and he was a valiant soldier, but he had leprosy. Context in this verse, we are introduced to Nabal, a commander in the Aramean army. Despite his military success and esteemed devotion, Naaman's afflicted with leprosy is delivered in skin disease. This verse demonstrates that even those who seem to have it all can still face challenges and struggles. It reminds us that no one is exempt from difficulties in life, regardless of their status or achievements. Practically, we can apply this lesson by recognizing that everyone, including ourselves, faces trials and hardships. It encourages us to develop empathy and compassion toward others, understanding that they may be battling unseen battles. It also reminds us to approach our own challenges with humility and seek God's guidance and healing in all aspects of our lives. In verse 9, so Nabal went with his horses and chariots and stopped at the door of Elijah's house. Context in this verse, Nabal arrives at the doorstep of Elijah's house, seeking a cure for his leprosy, and he comes in his grandeur with horses and chariots, expecting a grand reception. This verse highlights the importance of humility and surrender when seeking God's help. It reminds us that true healing and breakthrough come when we approach God with humility and a willingness to submit to His instructions. Practically, we can apply this lesson by humbling ourselves before God, setting aside our pride and self-sufficiency. It encourages us to approach God with an open heart, willing to follow His guidance, and surrendering our own agendas. It reminds us that God's ways may not align with our expectations, but His plans are always for our ultimate good. 2 Kings chapter verse 14. So he went down and dipped himself in the Jordan 7 times, as the man of God had told him, and his flesh was restored and became clean like that of a young boy. Nabal follows Elijah's instructions and dips himself in the Jordan River 7 times. As a result, his leprosy is completely healed, and his skin is restored to its original condition. The application is first demonstrates the power of obedience and faith in receiving God's healing and restoration. It teaches us the importance of trusting in God's instructions, even when they may seem inconvenient or contrary to our expectations. Practically, we can apply this lesson by obeying God's commands and trusting in His wisdom, even when it goes against our human understanding. It encourages us to have faith in God's healing, knowing that His ways are higher than ours. It reminds us that obedience and faith are key components in experiencing God's miraculous work in our lives. In summary, 2 Kings chapter 5 teaches us the importance of recognizing our own vulnerabilities and seeking God's guidance and healing. It emphasizes the significance of humility, surrender, obedience, and faith in receiving God's restoration. May we apply these lessons in our lives, humbling ourselves before God, surrendering our pride, and trusting in His instructions and healing power. So in 2 Kings chapter 6.
The floating axe head. One day the group of prophets came to Elisha and told him, "As you can see, this place where we meet with you is too small. Let's go down to the Jordan River, where there are plenty of logs. There we can build a new place for us to meet." "All right," he told them, "go ahead." "Please come with us," someone suggested. "I will," he said. So he went with them. When they arrived at the Jordan, they began cutting down trees. But as one of them was cutting a tree, his axe head fell into the river. "Oh, sir," he cried, "it was a borrowed axe." "Where did it fall?" the man of God asked. When he showed him the place, Elisha cut a stick and threw it into the water at that spot. Then the axe head floated to the surface. "Grab it," Elisha said. And the man reached out and grabbed it. Elisha traps the Arameans. When the king of Aram was at war with Israel, he would confer with his officers and say, "We will mobilize our forces at such and such a place." But immediately Elisha, the man of God, would warn the king of Israel, "Do not go near that place, for the Arameans are planning to mobilize their troops there." So the king of Israel would send word to the place indicated by the man of God. Time and again, Elisha warned the king so that he would be on the alert there. The king of Aram became very upset over this. He called his officers together and demanded, "Which of you is the traitor? Who has been informing the king of Israel of my plans?" "It's not us, my lord the king," one of the officers replied. "Elisha the prophet in Israel tells the king of Israel even the words you speak in the privacy of your bedroom." "Go and find out where he is," the king commanded, "so I can send troops to seize him." And the report came back, "Elisha is at Dothan." So one night the king of Aram sent a great army with many chariots and horses to surround the city. When the servant of the man of God got up early the next morning and went outside, there were troops, horses, and chariots everywhere. "Oh, sir, what will we do now?" the young man cried to Elisha. "Don't be afraid," Elisha told him, "for there are more on our side than on theirs." Then Elisha prayed, "O Lord, open his eyes and let him see." The Lord opened the young man's eyes, and when he looked up, he saw that the hillside around Elisha was filled with horses and chariots of fire. As the Aramean army advanced toward him, Elisha prayed, "O Lord, please make them blind." So the Lord struck them with blindness as Elisha had asked. Then Elisha went out and told them, "You have come the wrong way. This isn't the right city. Follow me, and I will take you to the man you are looking for." And he led them to the city of Samaria. As soon as they had entered Samaria, Elisha prayed, "O Lord, now open their eyes and let them see." So the Lord opened their eyes, and they discovered that they were in the middle of Samaria. When the king of Israel saw them, he shouted to Elisha, "My father, should I kill them? Should I kill them?" "Of course not," Elisha replied. "Do we kill prisoners of war? Give them food and drink and send them home again to their master." So the king made a great feast for them, and then sent them home to their master. After that, the Aramean raiders stayed away from the land of Israel. Ben-Hadad besieges Samaria. Sometime later, however, King Ben-Hadad of Aram mustered his entire army and besieged Samaria. As a result, there was a great famine in the city. The siege lasted so long that a donkey's head sold for 80 pieces of silver, and a cup of dove's dung sold for 5 pieces of silver. One day, as the king of Israel was walking along the wall of the city, a woman called to him, "Please help me, my lord the king." He answered, "If the Lord doesn't help you, what can I do? I have neither food from the threshing floor nor wine from the press to give you." But then the king asked, "What is the matter?" She replied, "This woman said to me, 'Come on, let's eat your son today. Then we will eat my son tomorrow.' So we cooked my son and ate him. Then the next day I said to her, 'Kill your son so we can eat him.' But she has hidden her son." When the king heard this, he tore his clothes in despair. And as the king walked along the wall, the people could see that he was wearing burlap under his robe next to his skin. "May God strike me and even kill me if I don't separate Elisha's head from his shoulders this very day," the king vowed. Elisha was sitting in his house with the elders of Israel when the king sent a messenger to summon him. But before the messenger arrived, Elisha said to the elders, "A murderer has sent a man to cut off my head. When he arrives, shut the door and keep him out. We will soon hear his master's steps following him." While Elisha was still saying this, the messenger arrived, and the king said, "All this misery is from the Lord. Why should I wait for the Lord any longer?"
So, first, 2 Kings 6.
Chapter 7. Elisha replied, "Listen to this message from the Lord."
So, 2 Kings verse 6, the man of God asked, "Where did it fall?" When he showed him the place, Elijah got a stick, threw it there, and made the iron float. Context in this verse: a man loses a borrowed iron axe head while working near the Jordan River, and he seeks help from the prophet Elijah, who asks where it fell. After being shown a location, Elijah performs a miracle by making the heavy iron axe head float on the surface of the water. This verse highlights God's power to intervene in our everyday lives and perform miracles. It reminds us that nothing is too difficult for God, and He can bring supernatural solutions to our problems. Practically, we can apply this lesson by trusting in God's ability to provide solutions and help in our challenging situations. It encourages us to seek God's guidance and assistance when we face difficulties, knowing that He can make a way where there may seem no way, and it reminds us to have faith in His miracles' power and to rely on Him in all circumstances. The context in this verse: Elijah's servant is fearful when he sees that they are surrounded by the enemy army. Elijah reassures him by declaring that those who are with them, referring to the angelic host of God's, outnumber their adversaries. This verse teaches us about the unseen spiritual realities that surround us and the protection and support we have from God. It reminds us that in the midst of challenging circumstances, we have divine assistance and the heavenly army fighting on our behalf. Practically, we can apply this lesson by cultivating a deeper awareness of God's presence in spiritual realm. It encourages us to trust in God's protection and provision even when we face overwhelming odds. It reminds us to rely on His strength and seek His guidance in all times, fear and uncertainty, knowing that He is with us and fighting on our behalf. 2 Kings chapter verse 22, do not kill them. He answered, would you kill those who have captured your own sword or bow? Set food and water before them so that they may eat and drink and then go back to their master. Context in this verse: after the enemy army is captured by Elijah, he instructs the king of Israel not to kill them, but instead treat them with a kindness and hospitality. Elijah encourages the provision of food and water for their nourishment before sending them back to their master. This verse teaches us about the importance of showing kindness and mercy even to our enemies. It reminds us that as followers of Christ, we are called to love and extend grace to all, regardless of their actions regard towards us. Practically, we can apply this lesson by practicing forgiveness and showing compassion to those who have wronged us. It encourages us to attend hospitality and generosity, seeking to reconcile and restore relationships rather than seeking revenge. It reminds us to reflect the character of Christ by responding with love and grace even in difficult situations. In summary, 2 Kings chapter 6 teaches us about God's ability to perform miracles, the assurance of His presence and protection, and the importance of showing kindness and mercy to others. May we apply these lessons in our lives, trusting in God's miracles power, relying on His presence and guidance, and attending loving grace to all.
Chapter 7. Elisha replied, "Listen to this message from the Lord. This is what the Lord says. By this time tomorrow in the markets of Samaria, 5 quarts of choice flour will cost only 1 piece of silver, and 10 quarts of barley grain will cost only 1 piece of silver." The officer assisting the king said to the man of God, "That couldn't happen even if the Lord opened the windows of heaven." But Elisha replied, "You will see it happen with your own eyes, but you won't be able to eat any of it." Lepers visit the enemy camp. Now there were 4 men with leprosy sitting at the entrance of the city gates. "Why should we sit here, waiting to die?" they asked each other. "We will starve if we stay here, but with the famine in the city, we will starve if we go back there. So we might as well go out and surrender to the Aramean army. If they let us live, so much the better, but if they kill us, we would have died anyway." So at twilight, they set out for the camp of the Arameans. But when they came to the edge of the camp, no one was there, for the Lord had caused the Aramean army to hear the clatter of speeding chariots and the galloping of horses and the sounds of a great army approaching. "The king of Israel has hired the Hittites and Egyptians to attack us," they cried to one another. So they panicked and ran into the night, abandoning their tents, horses, donkeys, and everything else as they fled for their lives. When the lepers arrived at the edge of the camp, they went into one tent after another, eating and drinking wine, and they carried off silver and gold and clothing and hid it. Finally, they said to each other, "This is not right. This is a day of good news, and we aren't sharing it with anyone. If we wait until morning, some calamity will certainly fall upon us. Come on, let's go back and tell the people at the palace." So they went back to the city and told the gatekeepers what had happened. "We went out to the Aramean camp," they said, "and no one was there. The horses and donkeys were tethered and the tents were all in order, but there wasn't a single person around." Then the gatekeepers shouted the news to the people in the palace. Israel plunders the camp. The king got out of bed in the middle of the night and told his officers, "I know what has happened. The Arameans know we are starving, so they have left their camp and have hidden in the fields. They are expecting us to leave the city, and then they will take us alive and capture the city." One of his officers replied, "We had better send out scouts to check into this. Let them take 5 of the remaining horses. If something happens to them, it will be no worse than if they stay here and die with the rest of us." So 2 chariots with horses were prepared, and the king sent scouts to see what had happened to the Aramean army. They went all the way to the Jordan River, following a trail of clothing and equipment that the Arameans had thrown away in their mad rush to escape. The scouts returned and told the king about it. Then the people of Samaria rushed out and plundered the Aramean camp. So it was true that 5 quarts of choice flour were sold that day for 1 piece of silver, and 10 quarts of barley grain were sold for 1 piece of silver, just as the Lord had promised. The king appointed his officer to control the traffic at the gate, but he was knocked down and trampled to death as the people rushed out. So everything happened exactly as the man of God had predicted when the king came to his house. The man of God had said to the king, "By this time tomorrow in the markets of Samaria, 5 quarts of choice flour will cost 1 piece of silver, and 10 quarts of barley grain will cost 1 piece of silver." The king's officer had replied, "That couldn't happen even if the Lord opened the windows of heaven." And the man of God had said, "You will see it happen with your own eyes, but you won't be able to eat any of it." And so it was, for the people trampled him to death at the gate.
So, 2 Kings chapter 7, verse 3. Now there were 4 men with leprosy at the entrance of the city gate, and they said to each other, "Why stay here until we die?" Context in this verse: 4 men are called who are afflicted with leprosy find themselves in dire situation. The city there is under siege and near severe famine. Realizing their desperate circumstances, they question why they should remain in their current situation until they perish. This verse encourages us to take action and seek new possibles. Even in the midst of difficult circumstances, it reminds us that staying stagnant, accepting defeat is not the answer. Practically, we can apply this lesson by adopting a productive mindset. Instead of resigning ourselves to our current circumstances, we can explore new opportunities, seek creative solutions, and take steps toward change. It reminds us to trust in God's guidance and have faith that He can provide us unexpected ways out of difficult situations. 2 Kings verse 9. Then they said to each other, "What we're doing is not right. This is a day of good news, and we are keeping it to ourselves. If we wait until daylight, punishment will overtake us, and let us go at once and report this to the royal palace." In this verse, the four men who discovered an abandoned enemy camp and intervening Persians realized that they cannot keep their credible news to themselves. They recognize that it is not right to withhold this good news while their fellow citizens are suffering and in need. This verse highlights the importance of sharing blessings and good news with others. It teaches us to have a mindset of generosity and compassion toward those around us. Practically, we can apply this lesson by actively seeking opportunities to bless and uplift others. It reminds us to be mindful of those who may be in need and to share our resources, time, and encouragement with them. It encourages us to be agents of good news and bearers of hope in a world that desperately needs it. 2 Kings verse 16. Then the people went out and plundered the camp of the Arameans. So Isaiah, the finest flour, sold for a shekel, and 2 seahs barley sold for a shekel, as the Lord has said. Context in this verse that the people of the city, following the report of their lepers, go out to the abandoned enemy camp and discover an abundance of food and resources. The situation dramatically shifts. And the prophecy of the prophet Elijah declaring affordable prices for food is fulfilled. This verse demonstrates God's faithfulness in fulfilling his promises, and it reminds us the importance of trusting in God's word, the Bible, and relying on his provision. Practically, we can apply this lesson by placing our trust in God's promises, even when our circumstances seem impossible. And it encourages us to have faith that God can turn our situations around and provide for our needs in unexpected ways. It reminds us to be patient and wait on God's perfect timing, knowing that he is faithful to his word. In summary, 2 Kings chapter 7 teaches us the importance of taking action and seeking new responsive possibilities in difficult circumstances, sharing blessings and good news with others, and trusting in God's faithfulness to fulfill his promises. May we apply these lessons in our lives, being protective and seeking solutions, sharing God's love and provision with others, and placing our trust in him to provide for our needs. So it would be chapter 8. You just gotta wait for it to play. Don't know why it's like doing this. Come on. Just how bad that freaking service is out here.
Chapter 8. The woman from Shunem returns home. Elisha had told the woman whose son he had brought back to life, "Take your family and move to some other place, for the Lord has called for a famine on Israel that will last for 7 years." So the woman did as the man of God instructed. She took her family and settled in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. After the famine ended, she returned from the land of the Philistines, and she went to see the king about getting back her house and land. As she came in, the king...
And there it goes, stops. Just insane.
was talking with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God. The king had just said, "Tell me some stories about the great things Elisha has done." And Gehazi was telling the king about the time Elisha had brought a boy back to life. At that very moment, the mother of the boy walked in to make her appeal to the king about her house and land. "Look, my lord the king," Gehazi exclaimed. "Here is the woman now, and this is her son, the very one Elisha brought back to life." "Is this true?" the king asked her. And she told him the story.
Oh my goodness.
So he directed one of his officials to see that everything she had told the woman whose son he had brought back to life, "Take your family and move to some other place, for the Lord has called for a famine on Israel that will last for 7 years." So the woman did as the man of God instructed. She took her family and settled in the land of the Philistines for 7 years. After the famine ended, she returned from the land of the Philistines, and she went to see the king about getting back her house and land. As she came in, the king was talking with Gehazi, the servant of the man of God. The king had just said, "Tell me some stories about the great things Elisha has done." And Gehazi was telling the king about the time Elisha had brought a boy back to life. At that very moment, the mother of the boy walked in to make her appeal to the king about her house and land. "Look, my lord the king," Gehazi exclaimed. "Here is the woman now, and this is her son, the very one Elisha brought back to life." "Is this true?" the king asked her. And she told him the story. So he directed one of his officials to see that everything she had lost was restored to her, including the value of any crops that had been harvested during her absence. Hazael murders Ben-Hadad. Elisha went to Damascus, the capital of Aram, where King Ben-Hadad lay sick. When someone told the king that the man of God had come, the king said to Hazael, "Take a gift to the man of God. Then tell him to ask the Lord, 'Will I recover from this illness?'" So Hazael loaded down 40 camels with the finest products of Damascus as a gift for Elisha. He went to him and said, "Your servant Ben-Hadad, the king of Aram, has sent me to ask, 'Will I recover from this illness?'" And Elisha replied, "Go and tell him, 'You will surely recover.' But actually the Lord has shown me that he will surely die." Elisha stared at Hazael with a fixed gaze until Hazael became uneasy. Then the man of God started weeping. "What's the matter, my lord?" Hazael asked him. Elisha replied, "I know the terrible things you will do to the people of Israel. You will burn their fortified cities, kill their young men with the sword, dash their little children to the ground, and rip open their pregnant women." Hazael responded, "How could a nobody like me ever accomplish such great things?" Elisha answered, "The Lord has shown me that you are going to be the king of Aram." When Hazael left Elisha and went back, the king asked him, "What did Elisha tell you?" And Hazael replied, "He told me that you will surely recover." But the next day Hazael took a blanket, soaked it in water, and held it over the king's face until he died. Then Hazael became the next king of Aram. Jehoram rules in Judah. Jehoram, son of King Jehoshaphat of Judah, began to rule over Judah in the 5th year of the reign of Joram, son of Ahab, king of Israel. Jehoram was 32 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 8 years. But Jehoram followed the example of the kings of Israel and was as wicked as King Ahab, for he had married one of Ahab's daughters. So Jehoram did what was evil in the Lord's sight. But the Lord did not want to destroy Judah, for he had made a covenant with David and promised that his descendants would continue to rule, shining like a lamp forever. During Jehoram's reign, the Edomites revolted against Judah and crowned their own king. So Jehoram went with all his chariots to attack the town of Zair. The Edomites surrounded him and his chariot commanders, but he went out at night and attacked them under cover of darkness. But Jehoram's army deserted him and fled to their homes. So Edom has been independent from Judah to this day. The town of Libnah also revolted about that same time. The rest of the events in Jehoram's reign and everything he did are recorded in the book of the history of the kings of Judah. When Jehoram died, he was buried with his ancestors in the city of David. Then his son Ahaziah became the next king. Ahaziah rules in Judah. Ahaziah, son of Jehoram, began to rule over Judah in the 12th year of the reign of Joram, son of Ahab, king of Israel. Ahaziah was 22 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 1 year. His mother was Athaliah, a granddaughter of King Omri of Israel. Ahaziah followed the evil example of King Ahab's family. He did what was evil in the Lord's sight, just as Ahab's family had done, for he was related by marriage to the family of Ahab. Ahaziah joined Joram, son of Ahab, the king of Israel, in his war against King Hazael of Aram at Ramoth Gilead. When the Arameans wounded King Joram in the battle, he returned to Jezreel to recover from the wounds he had received at Ramoth. Because Joram was wounded, King Ahaziah of Judah went to Jezreel to visit him.
So which one is it? Yeah, it's 8. So 2 Kings chapter 8. Now Elijah said to the woman whose son has restored you to life, go away with your family and stay for a while wherever you can, because the Lord has decreed a famine in the land that will last 7 years. Context in this verse, Elijah advises a woman whose son he had previously restored to life to leave the land due to an unrepentant 7-year famine that the Lord had decreed. He instructs her to find a safe place for her and her family to reside during a time of security. This verse emphasizes the importance of listening and to following God's guidance. It reminds us that God is aware of the challenges we may face and can provide wisdom and direction to navigate through difficult seasons. Practically, we can apply this lesson by seeking God's guidance in times of uncertainty or hardship, and encourages us to be open to His leading and trust that He will provide a way for us. It reminds us to prioritize the safety and well-being of our families, making wise decisions based on the guidance we receive from God. Verse 4, the king was talking to Giziah, the servant of the man of God, and had said, tell me about all the great things Elijah had done. Context in this verse, the king of Israel requests Giziah, the servant of Elijah, to recount the remarkable deeds that Elijah had performed. The king is eager to hear about the miracles and acts of God's power that have been accomplished through Elijah. This verse highlights the impact of witnessing and sharing the works of God. It reminds us that the importance of sharing testimonies or stories of God's faithfulness and power. Practically, we can apply this lesson by being intentionally about sharing our personal experiences of God's work in our lives, and encourage us to testify about the goodness and faithfulness of God, not only to inspire others, but also to remind ourselves of His power and provision. It reminds us the significance of sharing our faith and the impact of it can have on those who hear it, potentially leading them to seek and experience God for themselves. Verse 11, he started at him with a fixed gaze until Hazael was embarrassed, and then the man of God began to weep. Context in this verse, Elijah gazes attentively of Hazael, who were to become the future king of Aram. Elijah's gaze makes Hazael uncomfortable, and as a response, Elijah begins to weep. This verse teaches us about the discernment and compassion of the prophet Elijah. It reminds us the ability to perceive the intentions and actions of others, even when they may not readily apparent. Practically, we can apply this lesson by developing discernment and infinitely inner towards others, and encourages us to be attentive to the needs and emotions of those around us, seeking to understand their inner struggles and motivations. It reminds us to respond with compassion and care, even when faced with difficult or uncomfortable situations. In summary, 2 Kings chapter 8 teaches us the importance of listening to God's guidance, sharing testimonies of God's work, and developing discernment and compassion towards others. May we apply these lessons in our lives, seeking God's wisdom, testifying to His faithfulness, and showing infinitely care for those around us. So this is a little prayer for this example. It says, Heavenly Father, I come before you seeking your wisdom, discernment, and mercy. If through my words I have promoted views that disrespect the humanity or concept of others, I pray for forgiveness. You alone know my intentions or circumstances, yet any mistakes I heard. People are still mistakes. Guide me to speak only ways that live and empower all those involved in a discussion. Show me where my understanding is lacking so I may gain perceptive, avoid causing pain, and spread more messages of care, compassion, and justice instead. Bless all who have taken the time to engage with me and point out blind point spots. Their insights are gifts helping me improve, and bless anyone negativity impacted that through your love their wounds may heal. Going through help me use this experience to listen more, judge less, and thoughtfully consider every side before advising on sensitive topics. I ask this in your holy name, amen. Ultimate wisdom and forgiveness lie only with. So that was chapter 2 Kings, chapter 5, verse, I think it was 5, verse, chapters 2 Kings 8. Where is that? I only have like one left. I have to read 9 and 10 next. 6. 2 Kings chapter 6 verse. 2 Kings, I think it was, yeah. Yeah, it was 2 Kings chapter 5 to 2 Kings chapter 8.